What's up, everybody? Rick Roque, Dr. Rick Roque in the house. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing really well, man. How are you? This is great. I love the lead in. That was
Are
a
you
great
having an
material.
earthquake there? Are you having a some kind of an event? Your camera was shaking. It's no longer. Okay, that's good. All
Yeah,
right.
sorry. I was
Excellent.
moving the laptop away, so it didn't cut off my head like it was earlier. Although
Well, I mean, you got such a beautiful face.
I don't have
I would
hair,
really
so
hate to
I wouldn't even
deprive the
know.
audience of all that goodness. Rick, let's talk. Let's jump right in. So yesterday,
Yeah,
the news hit that Sierra Pacific, a company where you were once employed,
yeah,
was acquired, I guess, by Union Home.
yeah.
The rich get richer. I think there's a lot to unpack here. As another company of similar size, there are a lot in that band of, call it 800 million to 2 billion. It's just hard to survive these days, and I know you've spent a lot of time in your career around mergers and acquisitions. So, what's your initial reaction?
Well, look, I wasn't all that surprised. Obviously, look, I started in this business. I worked for my father in the '90s. I started in this business really separate from the family business in 2002. And Sierra was a historic, in my view, a historic sort of legendary brand, right? Um, they really grew into prominence as a wholesale platform, and Jim Cafrini ran a family run business just like my father. And in fact, I told him this a year ago, that his relationship with his daughter and in this family concept of what he has done reminded me a lot of the way my father ran his business. Um, and and so quite frankly, like I always had a tremendous amount of respect for what Jim had done with Sierra and how it grew, and how it survived, multiple market cycles. In they were always an extremely strong servicer and great in wholesale. Not the greatest, or sort of weak on retail, weak on consumer direct, not really a correspondent player, but really a phenomenal sort of servicer and a very reputable wholesale alternative to UWM and Rocket. Most of us don't get the opportunity to start a company, and to be successful, period. But to achieve the kind of success that Jim and his family achieved with it, it's a resounding success.
Yeah, a definite end of an era too. It's a definite
Yeah.
end of an era. Like the Sierra Pacific was founded in 1986.
Oh yeah.
According to their website, and I got into the business in 1997, 1998. So I mean, this is a name that I knew that was recognizable, and there are quite a few of these names now that have stacked up over time. You can think of a few right off of the top of your head. Academy Mortgage, like who would have ever thought that they wouldn't be around anymore? Draper Kramer, Thrive, Home Point, Home Bridge, Finance of America, Hometown Lenders. I mean, the list goes on, and it begs the question: how is it in this moment in time, lenders, some of them are able to really thrive and prosper despite the climate, and some just aren't able to make it to the other side?
Yeah. I mean, you get companies like PacRes, who sold to Go. They were a phenomenal regional lender in Lake Oswego, Oregon. Mission Hills Mortgage at Northern California got acquired by, Bank of California. I mean, I've always, and I would say my father was the same way, where he was really, really effective. Like back in the day, you could be a really effective mortgage lender in your pocket within your local regional environment because you knew the realtors, you knew the builders, you lived next to the people you're doing mortgages with. They were a truly community-based lenders, and Sierra Pacific grew very much, out of that sort of era of mortgage lending, similar to all the ones that we discussed. But in my view, prior to my work with NFM, but when I was really consulting, and I had my hands on a lot of mortgage companies, and mortgage companies would always say, "Look, we're doing $1 billion a year or $500 million a year in Virginia Beach or this local market. Like, how do we grow nationally?" Right. And the theme that I discovered is that companies get stuck in this ditch. They can't seem to grow out of their local pocket. In large part, and I'm not attributing this necessarily to Sierra, but there are a number of attributes across all of these companies that struggle to go national retail. And that is just either. And again, this is not a comment about Sierra. This is more of a common theme I've seen across dozens and dozens of companies across the country who've struggled to get out of. Thrive's a good example, where they just struggle to get out of this local market. Very successful, but when you add a branch in Kansas or in Missouri or in Florida, the things that companies like NFM and others have done such a good job being able to manage, it's hard to if you don't have the leadership. Typically it's a leadership issue. It's a balance sheet issue. You don't have the cash to do it. You almost don't have the cash to have confidence in your team, and you don't have the ability to really hire in a way to allow for credible leaders to come in to lead. And as an owner, sometimes owners just have a hard time stepping out of the way.
And as they try and expand, they put their trust and faith into people, some of whom they don't know or they've not worked with intimately before. And so we've all been in situations where we thought we were going to be working with someone who was X, but they turned in to Y. So there's that element as well as companies try and scale and grow. For Union Home, this is a name it's a big name. It continues to get bigger, run by Bill Cosgrove. For them, it's an acquisition, right? And I don't know if you have the numbers as far as Sierra. I know they're probably at your fingertips in terms of what they've done in the last year. I know you'll share that with us here momentarily, but for them, it's a nice feather in their cap. Assuming they can hang on to whatever retail is left at Sierra. That's a name that continues to grow for sure. Union, but it also is a moment where there are less options in the playing field, right? And you've focused a lot on UWM and how they kind of have a pseudo retail channel of their own and how much market share that's gobbling up, right? It's the broker channel is probably 30% at this point. And you look over at the IMBs, I mean, there are less options for people to choose from for sure, but companies like Union, companies like NFM, and many others are still thriving, prospering, despite the fact that there are those around us that aren't able to.
Yeah. No, I think that just to get back to your earlier question, I mean, you get an organization like Union using Redder, which is obviously a platform that we benefit greatly from with our relationship with Steven. In the organization. I mean, Union is of the last 12, 13 months, they're a $7-8 billion company. Sierra, adds probably about, 800 million or so in retail platform. So it's a good production driver. And I think the loan officers at Sierra will probably benefit from that leadership, because that's what they sort of always desperately needed, was just good, solid retail leadership. Right. And so I think they'll be much better served. There's no question about it over at Union. And Bill runs an incredible company. I mean, Bill runs that company with an iron fist, and it's a very disciplined, very systems oriented organization.
It's also an organization that tied people up on non-solicitations, non-competes.
Yeah,
particularly non-competes. I mean, they were. I mean, you give them credit for having a good company that's doing well and growing, but they were the only company I knew of that had very punitive language in their agreements.
Yeah,
in terms of non-competes, where they actually didn't just have those things, but they would go after loan officers to say, you can't do business in those 5 states you did them for while you were with us.
Yeah,
and they'll actually go and chase people. How do I know? Because we had a loan officer who basically upended their entire life, new baby and everything, because they made the decision to leave that organization and come over here. And they chased him down, went to court, and showed up 3 times to get this guy banned in those 5 zip codes. And it basically, took him out. So I think they've pivoted that language, which is good and which is important. Another factor here, Rick, is we continue to see the consolidation. And I think something worth talking about are third-party vendors. You don't think about them in these situations, but now for them, they see this and they see, oh, you've got however many 100 loan officers and you're attached to our system at lender X that just got acquired by lender Y. And there's almost never 100% synergy.
Yeah.
And so for the third-party vendors who are already just hanging on, right? They've got less seats to sell. The loan officer population has greatly diminished. I just want to underscore the significance of these things, which is not talked about at all, to third-party vendors. And I think our friend Richard Greiser, who's been in the third-party space quite a bit, is watching this. He commented. I'd be curious to know what Richard would have to say about how disruptive it is. But Rick, go ahead and comment on that.
I think that the tech stack component is interesting, and the vendor, because you get an organization, and this is a really prime example of that. Sierra has a lot of proprietary software for their POS, for their LOS, and I think they do use Total Expert, and I believe Union, I think there is an Encompass shop, has their own. I think they use Blend for their POS. I don't know that for sure.
But the point being how disruptive it is
it's
in an ecosystem that is already on very thin ground. It's not a secret that many tech entities who poured into the space around COVID raised significant money. It hasn't turned out the way they wanted it to turn out, and these moments don't help.
Yeah. No, I mean, like you've been on the forefront of a lot of good posts around customer service and the way vendors are intended to sort of serve and support lenders, and then to be able to provide, if the tech vendor gets acquired, there should be some communication there, and I think the same thing vice versa. I think if there's once that the acquisition takes hold, there's got to be appropriate communication to wind down contracts. It can be a really costly endeavor. I mean, you can. There's companies you and I've talked to where they're tied up with Optimal Blue or whatever the case may be, and they're stuck with a $300,000, 3 or 5 year contract. There's real cost considerations that have to be factored in here, and those are all obviously negotiated into the deal, or they should be. Because of a relationship or whatever, you can wind those those contracts down. But no, it's the vendor piece is a real casualty of the consolidation. There's no doubt.
And they are at an inflection point too, Rick. I'm hearing more and more, and this will resonate to people out there that are running companies or dealing with third-party vendors. There's like a sea change going on when it comes to many third-party vendors who are seeing the seat count, which is typically what they make their money on, right? Sign an agreement, minimum amount of seats. We know we're going to get this revenue they'll book the revenue for a year, 2 years, 3 years, however long the contract is. And I know, because I've talked to more than a handful of them that are already trying to figure out what the move forward world looks like as we get into this direct-to-consumer flywheel space, with servicers and loan and retail teaming up. We've got 2 massive examples of that with Guild and Lakeview, and Rocket and Mr. Cooper. So the writing's on the wall for tech vendors to begin with.
Yeah.
That, oh my goodness, we thought there were going to be 300,000 loan officers when we got into this thing. Now we're down to under 100,000 or whatever that number is. We've got to change our model altogether. And then on top of that, now you have less people to sell to, right? Because companies are teaming up with others.
Well, think about, and let's dovetail it back to the acquisition side of things, like the numbers you just outlined. I mean, think about companies who want to grow. Like when you look at the 180,000 licensed loan officers that might be out there, but only about 70,000 of those actually produce. And then you get down to, like, I was talking to Dave Savage about this. So then you get down to like maybe 50 or 55,000 of the loan officers that everyone's fighting for, right? So in a contracting market, you have organizations that have to be extremely competitive, totally in line with their tech stack, have the capital and resources to do it, have the leadership, to be able to attract that talent your way. So then you get these, environments of some, these companies that simply are weak, and not every company's strong, of course, but if you're weak in enough areas, it puts you at such a massive disadvantage in a contracting market, and then you don't grow. Then you're growing
leadership has never been more important. I look at a company, look at the company we work with at NFM, and the fact that the company's been around so long, and this is not a billboard. In fact, before we came on here, I said, let's not make this about us, but we are a survivor. I mean, we've been around for 28 years, right? And we have one focus. It's retail, right? And so that's another question, is like, this is another example of a company in Sierra Pacific that tried to do it all.
Yeah.
Right. And Caliber tried to do it all too. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there are many examples of companies that, I think the question is, and PRMG does this okay, like in the long run, can you run a highly effective wholesale channel and retail channel in mortgage? And is that getting tougher, or is that maybe getting easier because there are less options now as we look forward into a year from now? It's an interesting talking point.
Well, it is the question, and I think you hit on this. The question is, will the future look like the past, right? Will the future mirror the challenges in being able to pursue both channels that clearly has not been successful in the past? That was one of my key conversations I had with Sierra over a year ago, basically saying that like what the goal is to be very successful in wholesale retail. Nobody does it very well except for PRMG. I think that they've done a good job, but again, they're not dominant. They're not, I think they'll do what, 2.5 billion, 2 billion or so in retail, which is phenomenal. Right. The question is diversifying. If you're niche-y in two markets, will your production results be continued to be niche-y, or is technology and consolidation in the future, is it becoming more ripe? As long as you have the cash, the balance sheet, and the leadership,
Rick,
is it going to become more ripe?
It's hard to run a successful business as it is, just
That's
on
right.
retail, or just in retail, or just in wholesale, just in retail, just in direct to consumer, right?
Yeah.
Like it's hard. And oftentimes, real quick, and this happened at Caliber. This was part of their downfall. Is, I know this because I know many people that were at Caliber, and they flourished while they were there, and things were going well. But there was a moment in time when retail was carrying wholesale, and so what happened? Well, they looked to retail to offset the losses in wholesale, and all of a sudden they started to pump down these edicts that you can no longer have loan officer assistance, or now you have to pay more of that share, and we're capping your comp. And so even though you're doing really well over here in this channel, you're going to pay the price because this other channel we tried to make great isn't doing so hot. And so you're going to now supplement
and that is the common accounting challenge. There's always a robbing Peter to pay Paul. There's always some corporate allocation that ends up impacting, retail P&Ls. Not always, but in cases where I've consulted or been a part of companies that have both, they're always trying to level the scales, and it ends up making retail extremely uncompetitive because you're getting hit with an extra $2,000 or $3,000. Dave Bazinski and myself, we launched the retail platform over at Michigan Mutual. Again, a regional wholesale platform, not dissimilar, quite frankly, to Sierra Pacific. And they were really good in their pockets for wholesale, but, struggled on the retail side because, again, they were constantly sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul to kind of subsidize one. So the retail money, because of the fatter margins, were being able to subsidize the wholesale strategy because of the thinner margins. And that was another acquisition. They got acquired by Supreme. So, I just think that it's going to become, but the question that I have for you, Greg, is that you have these servicers that have always historically been famously bad at retail, always historically famously bad at purchase, right? But now there's a thought process in that channel to say, like, we can be great because of AI and because of just, leaner technology, and a smarter use case and an integrated experience to the consumer, that we can capture purchase business. And I the technology side of me says that's a pretty plausible, like the future won't look like the past, those struggles. But the problem to me seems cultural. I still have a hard time believing that Lakeview, just because they're connected to Rocket, is all of a sudden is going to be this wildly successful, venture, in that they're going to be able to overcome the traditional barrier.
I think you meant Lakeview and Guild, not Lakeview and
Rocket.
I
apologize.
I just want to catch that real quick. No, I agree, and I did a post yesterday, and the post on LinkedIn was, communities will always matter, and those originators and those book. Originators, those loan officers that pour into their community, that know their community, and the lenders that really lean into that will always prevail. Yeah, and so the reason that direct to consumer hasn't worked in purchase, and very well may not, like the jury is still out. I know many of you think that we're going to look up one day and Rocket will be at 30% or 50%. It's a greater chance that's not going to happen than is going to happen. And here's why. in the retail channel, in order to do purchase on the direct-to-consumer side, the only way to get it is to get less experienced loan officers who are willing to take a lot less than what they're getting now. And that gap isn't small. It's comparing 100 to 150 basis points in compensation to sometimes as low as 20 basis points, depending on the lead source, up to 50 or maybe 75. And so it's really hard. And in many cases in the direct-to-consumer model, they're not boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And so I think that will always prevail. If you're the name that comes out of the mouth at the local diner and the Starbucks and in the school systems and in the places where you live, you'll always get preferential treatment and you'll always have a chance to grab market share. We've got originators here at NFM, and thanks to what you pointed out recently, you did a deep dive into data. NFM has more loans closed per loan officer than any other IMB in the country at scale. Like, I don't know what the minimum was there, but of all the bigs, according to the data that you reported.
Yeah, the top 40 or so, yeah. Because there's always small companies that do a lot of, the ratio gets thrown off because they're not at scale, but yeah.
The reason is because we are really entrenched in communities, and the people that represent the organization go high and far to get ingrained there with the support of corporate. And so as if you're a loan officer at another lender or at a lender, right? Let's say, a Sierra Pacific type or any lender, like, Rick, I'll put it to you. What would be the most important things to look for to know that you're in the right place and that there is longevity in a runway? Now, granted, things happen that are out of your, that are not in your clear sight. I think what Academy had some kind of a fine they had to pay, like $28 million or something, that ended up being like a death knell to them. So, there are some things you can't see, but there are also a lot of things you can see in terms of where is the company headed, what kind of integration do they have with AI, and how's it being used, and how can it benefit me, and what is the organization doing to focus on a lower cost to produce, and if they're doing that, are they going to pass that win to me, or is corporate going to take all that? There's lots of different ways that you can look at the behavior at an organization. Another key question, then I'll be quiet and let you answer it, is who wags the tail of your IMB? Is it secondary? In other words, does the person that runs secondary have the mandate and the flexibility to dial up pricing and dial it down when the market moves? I know for us, we don't do that. That is absolutely against the rules to do that. We don't ever want to do that. But there are other companies, and I know one really big one, like a top 5, where I was told by the people that own the company that this person that runs secondary has the ability and the green light to turn the dial up and down, and that's how we stay profitable. So that's another, those are these, I'm just talking about the indicators to know, what, I'm probably at a place, it's never going to be 100% safe, but because they've got these attributes, I feel as safe as I can given the environment we're in. What are some of those things for you?
For me, it's leadership, number one. Does the leadership actually have experience in the specific area of concentration? If you have a leader that's like that, whose background is in wholesale, and they really want to drive growth in retail, and they have no retail VP, or they have no real retail leadership, but it's really driven from the top down, that's not going to be a very successful model at all. I think leadership, people confuse past successes as if that can be leveraged into other verticals, assuming that they will be successful in those other verticals because they've been successful over here. And the reality is that almost always becomes a money loser, always, and you end up spending a lot of time and money and frustration, in especially as a branch or loan officer coming in to join an organization like that, because you get sold on the vision to grow out this big retail platform. And the reality is, if you don't have good leadership, retail leadership to grow a retail platform, it's not going to be successful. Number one. Number two, I would say, the balance sheet is really key, and it's hard for a loan officer or branch manager to get a feel for that. When I was, when I would look at this myself, I'd always ask for the financials or get some sense. If I had a good group, I would always have them, like, we have to demonstrate to this organization, to that group production team, that we have sort of the financial staying power to weather, the bips, the blips in the marketplace. It's a really difficult thing to measure as a loan officer or branch manager. But I do think that it's important to get a sense of the financial sort of foundation. The third is track record. If you have a company that continuously has historically struggled, like if Freedom's a great, I mean, I love Freedom and I love Stan. It's one of the best organizations in the history of banking and the history of mortgage lending, but they've always struggled with retail. And Stan will tell you, I don't like retail. We don't make money at retail, right? And I just think that sometimes these organizations, it could be Planet, it could be Sierra Pacific, who have constantly struggled historically to be successful at retail. And it's not to say that they give up trying, but that's where you go back to the leadership. Like, who's actually at the helm? Who's actually running this, and do they have a track record of success in retail to accomplish retail goals? And technology is a big thing because it sounds so trite but if you're just vanilla on Encompass and Optimal Blue and you have your marketing websites and that's pretty much your tech stack and that's pretty much your offering, like, it's just, you're so stuck in the way we did business in 2011 that you look at the companies who are growing right now. Your friends at Annie Mac, your friends at Synergy One, like, those guys have been some of the fastest growing mortgage companies in the country right now. Why? They have great zeroed in focus on what they're doing, good retail leadership, incredible commitment to technology. I mean, I just think that those are really key attributes. And
well, let me throw out one more company.
Yeah.
While we're talking here, I'm going to share my screen real quick.
Yeah.
This is. May I do that, Dr. Rick?
Yes.
You mind if I call you doctor? You see this? Can you see my screen, Rick?
I cannot. Oh, now I can. It's coming. Yep. Oh yeah, Loan Depot. Gosh.
Look at this.
Yeah.
Look at this move in the stock. I've been talking about this now for 4 months. I mean, if you go back 3 months ago, you could have had this stock, right around here. Like it was, if you go back 6 months, you can see that the stock went all the way down to in May,
like a buck,
a low of about $1. And it was actually lower than this. But the point is, like, look how quickly, just since May.
Oh yeah.
This has, and a lot of it, as our good friend Mike Cush has pointed out, he's such a smart guy, is around the servicing they had, and that it was being discounted and shouldn't be. So maybe this is a reconciliation of that. But to me, this is the most interesting lender out there right now. Like, what's going on there? Is this just the Anthony, Shea effect? No dummy, obviously, right? And then what happens with them? Like, there was speculation they could potentially end up partnering in some way with a Zillow type, right? But I know people on the inside of Zillow, and the word coming out of Zillow is that they just want to stay on course and continue to build their own business. I think they did a roughly $3 billion in 24. They just want to focus on their connection to the originators in their sphere and grow it that way. So maybe Loan Depot just rises from the ashes and turns it around. I mean, could that happen?
It's an unbelievable story. Like a couple of years ago, you and I were talking, and I was like, this Loan Depot company, is running a sub 4 minute mile on a dirt track, barefoot, with the wind in their face. Like with all the negative press that they got, Anthony's not in the picture. The data breach and all these things, groups leaving. It seemed like their back was so far against the wall. And I'm telling you, they have raving fans. They have really, really, really good leadership. And they have good recruiting infrastructure. And I know just a little inside baseball. I know that they're really aggressively looking at acquisitions and really because they historically were always against P&Ls, always against DBAs, always against marketing sub brands, because it was all about Loan Depot. And now they've changed. Several years ago they changed and pivoted toward P&Ls. And now I understand that they're going to aggressively try to leverage this momentum in the stock market for acquisitions. And
Rick,
with Anthony at the helm, it's going to be incredible.
You said something we should just stop and just think for a minute about this.
Oh yeah.
As we look at what differentiates the winners from losers.
Oh yeah.
Isn't it the ones that see the change, don't
Yeah.
resist it, and are willing to pivot real time? Just
100%.
think about that for a minute. Like, if you
Oh,
just
yeah.
keep doing the same thing over and over again, feeling like you're Teflon for no good reason, and you're not making adjustments, your fate is pretty much sealed. So the fact that LD is doing that, what you described, and I know you know a lot of people there. I mean, that's you mentioned leadership is a critical component. Like,
Yeah.
loan
Incredible.
officers at all these companies, they rely on the leadership to make those kinds of moves. So when you
Yeah.
see your company making changes that move your cheese, which is ironic because those that follow Anthony know that he had this cryptic post 2 weeks ago about moving cheese. He never followed up, never said anything about it. I'm not sure if you saw it, but it
You
was
should
like,
have him on your show.
I'd love to have him on my show. That would be amazing. You want to make
Let's
Yeah.
arrange it. I'll
Yeah,
make some phone calls. I'll talk to people. We'll talk to people, and we'll make
that
it
would be
happen.
great.
Because I think it's worthy. There's few voices. There's Bill Dallas like voices that are just incredible, and obviously he's one of them. I mean, I mean, Loan Depot was nobody in 2014. Like, they hit the scene. The scene of the production crime, if you will. They really hit the top 20 in 2015, and they just took off with acquisitions. They did two fundamental. Mortgage Master was one. They gave him several billion, $5 or $6 billion, and there was another one. And they just took off, and then it fed right into their production strategy. But I think now that Anthony's back, man, I would not bet against them. I think that they are defying every public odd when it comes to mortgage companies, and they're gonna take market share. I don't think there's anything about it. And I do think, like, again, there is a collapse of that middle class mortgage banker. And I think the Sierra story is a good example of this. But all the other stories that you highlighted, like, there is a compression where the larger are getting much larger, and the smaller are disseminating. There's a much wider foundation of small, which is the rise of the broker community, right? Both delegated or the non-delegated and just pure broker sort of platforms. So it's the competitive grassroots by the brokers and the really competitive top tier of the industry is just squeezing out all the small to mid-sized companies that don't have the cash, don't have the leadership, and just don't have the systems.
We say that, right? But are we witnessing right now at this very moment, with the bond hovering around 4% and what seems to be a fait accompli, that rates are going to be coming down 25, 50 bips? Are we witnessing one of these moments where there are many firms or some firms on the verge of capitulation, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this life raft gets introduced that breathes life into them and gives them the opportunity to make another run and delay what appears to be inevitable so that the owners can cash in? And I'll give you a second part to that, Rick. If you're a loan officer at one of those companies, what's better, staying put or hitching your wagon right now to a company you think is built for more than just another run?
If you're part of an organization that doesn't fit the qualities of an organization that will survive and grow, that in essence have sort of weak, like kind of a weak mid-tier, where they've always been stuck at a certain tier. They've never been able to grow. They haven't been able to sort of bump or meet the vision or the promise that they're communicating to loan officers and branches. I think it's a great time to do a deal. And I'm not saying this for selfish reasons. I'm saying this because academically, and we've looked at some deals together where these deals, they could stay doing what they're doing, right? And maybe live another day and then put themselves back on the market a year from now to try to, when the market begins to moderate based on what's happening now. Or they could partner with an organization that has the systems, the scale, the cash, the leadership that their loan officers can benefit from right now with probably better pricing, better product, better execution, right? And it's like, why not do a deal? And more than likely, I guarantee you the deal with Union and Sierra, I don't know any of the details of the deal, but I will tell you, generally deals like this are like 30, 40 basis points broken up based on, production milestones that are achieved. And I guarantee you it's going to be based on growth and profitability. And by plugging into an $8 billion lender like Union or $9 billion lender like Union, they're going to be able to now have the economy of scale, the technology, the efficiency that they didn't have before. So regardless of what rates are doing, rates are a distraction to the core fundamental problem to these small to mid-sized lenders. Because they won't be able to scale and take advantage of rates going down 50 bips or so in my prediction, in the bump in production. They won't be able to benefit from it.
Well, you're making me think of something really that I thought of earlier, and that is, let's say rates go down to 5 3/4, which is definitely looks like it's on the board and feasible. Let's call it
amazing. Yeah,
let's call it 5.5.
Right.
Let's call it 5.5. So suddenly, millions of loans are in play. The other thing are the direct to consumer, the Freedoms and the Rockets of the world. Historically, when we've had an environment where so many people are in play, they reach a tipping point where they've got to turn the dial and close the valve a little bit, because it's hard as shit to go from, having your current staff, like you can only build out, you can only leave so much lax in the pipe to be able to take growth, right? So, but if there's something that happens that takes a lender like that that's doing 2,000 loans a month, and all of a sudden overnight you have the ability to do 3,000 or 3,500, that is not a light switch, folks. There's not 100% capacity waiting in the wings. Nobody's stupid to do that. So what does that moment look like too? And is that a come to Jesus moment for those companies that have geared up to be ready for some kind of a run?
That's
but
right.
Then what happens when it actually hits? What can they handle, and how does that impact the marketplace?
That's exactly right. I mean, if you get a company that's doing 500 or 600 million a year, and they're able to sort of plug into an organization like yours, like that you've led. I say yours because you've been with NFM for 27 years. It's like they have the opportunity to not just go from 500 to 600 million to $1 billion or $1.2 billion, but be able to leverage the economy of scale that a company like NFM provides. That in their margin opportunity is going to be so much substantially better than slugging it along in their current infrastructure that has all the friction for growth and the friction for margins and the friction and the lack of experience. They have all the same problems, right? Plugging into systems that you've spent 27 years building, they're not going to have those problems. They'll be able to scale and take advantage of AI and take advantage of products and efficiencies that has driven, the cost per closed loan, as far down as it has. I mean, it's just this is a great opportunity, I think, for companies to really emphasize their respective value. I think it puts them in a great negotiating position, but I think they'd be really foolish, especially if you're 55, 60, 65 years old or older. I think you'd be really foolish to wait this out, hoping for another sunny day, because we always know the clouds always come back. Being able to do a deal, and there's a handful of companies that are really good at doing large deals, right? Not too many of them, but there's a handful of companies like ours that actually do really good, effective deals at scale. And I think it's a great time to do a deal that's going to maximize the benefit for both parties.
Well, and sometimes you end up in a better spot. I mean, I can speak to that personally. A lot of people don't know this about my history, but I owned a mortgage company. I was the, founder, and we were a lender. This was 2002 to 2009. And I reached a point, where we were doing, our profitability was as high as it had ever been. But I had to look at NFM and say, well, you know what? They've got the tickets that I don't have. This is the moment. Like, I've got to look out for my employees and for the well-being of the company, and let me make this move. And I'm still here 16 years later. It was the best thing I ever did. So it's not a loss necessarily. And the thing is, you want to pivot in a moment of strength, not a moment of weakness, because then you can dictate the terms. There's one thing I must cover here, which is so important, is, we're talking about the strategy and all these things and about the business, but beneath the surface of the headlines are many people that woke up with a job yesterday that don't have one today.
Yeah,
and as an industry, we've got to get together and help those people out. NFM, our company, has got 9 or 10 openings currently. And before we hang up this call, I hope to put in the link what our openings are. We have to continue to look out for the administrative people who are the underbelly of our business. They are the true engine of the mortgage industry. Loans don't close without them. And now we've got, handfuls and handfuls of them that, as a result of this move between Sierra Pacific and Union, are out of a job. How do I know? Because I'm getting calls and we're getting applications coming in right now. So yes, there will be casualties. It's an unfortunate part of the business, but we got to support those people. We got to get behind them, find out who they are, what they can do, and see how many of them we can place.
I mean, I think you emphasize a human part of these acquisitions, because generally, when you get acquired, obviously you're leveraging existing infrastructure. So, a lot of the overlapping resources end up being sort of reduced, and because so much of the deal on a go forward basis is based on profitability of an organization like Sierra coming in. So naturally, the incentives are very much based on the deal is going to be structured to eliminate and structured to reduce headcounts and costs and overhead and so on and so forth. So I think it's a brilliant point, and it's a compassionate point, because
I think it's a good one to end on too. I mean, you and I we work together, so we talk every day, many times a day, and we can have these conversations for hours and hours and hours. But that is definitely I think a really good poignant point to leave this on. I mean, this has been good. This has been great. I'm not sure if it is worthy of being compared to the show that you host every Friday, which I understand is the
America's most watched.
It's the America's most watched podcast. So take a minute to tell people about that.
Well, ever since our first episode, we were America's most watched videocast for mortgage, housing, and real estate. It's every Friday at 12:30 with myself, Brock Cassidy, the Chief Revenue Officer at NewZip. Just a great technology platform for realtors and loan officers and lenders. And actually they have a builder incentive too that we should talk that he should talk to you about, to be able to provide builders an incentive, reduced real estate commission for consumers who work with partnered builders that work with NewZip. He was telling me about it, and I was like, you got to talk to Greg about that. And the other piece is Jeremy Potter. I think one of the best lawyers in think and really minds for technology, vision, and alignment.
You guys are so tall
in the industry.
I don't like being around you guys because you're all 6+ feet. Jeremy, I think, is like 6'4". Brock's got to be 6'3".
Yeah. It's
the only thing about you, Rick, is I think you might have lifts. I think there's a big secret about you that you're really like 5'4". And like you've been one of these guys that have answered those Facebook ads, that have gotten that insole, cushion.
Yes.
So next time I see you, I'm going to have you take your shoes off. Okay.
No, I'm about 6'1" with shoes on, 6'2", depending upon the types of shoes, maybe 6'2.5".
Cool. So
all right,
man.
This has been good, man.
This has been real. We'll get into the comment section here because we've got so many people participating here, including our good friend Tony Kaiko. But I promised to end. I'll throw his note up here, but I promised to end on this note and remind people, let's look out for those that don't have a job now, and let's get some dialogue going around that so we can place the folks that have been displaced by the Sierra Pacific Union home deal. And we wish both parties well, obviously. Rick, the good times are ahead. And we know that from all the years that we've been in the industry. For me, it's 28 now. For you, it's 20 plus. Like we know that each of these moments feels like it'll never die, and we emerge scarred and in a place where we're going to do less and less business. There's just going to be more and more opportunity. So again, it really harkens back to our point. You got to have the right focus, the right vision. You got to be implementing the right tools. And if you're doing all that and you have a team that is doing the right things, you're going to be incredible. That's the good news about everything happening. There's so much more. There are fewer people eating the pie. Now the pie has diminished some, but that's offset by the fact that there's so few people chomping at that pie. And I love good pie, Rick. I know you do too.
I love it. I love it.
Nothing like a good pie. All right, Rick, let's say goodbye.
Hey, I appreciate the invite, man. This was great. And I love the work you're doing with all of us. And this podcast is obviously, I think the best and most informative that's out there. So I'm looking forward to you continuing this. So this is great.
We'll do it again soon. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, man.
See ya.